Welcome to Compassion in Action. I'm your host, Angela Weston, and tonight's episode is all about bridging the gap between healthcare and cannabis.
Welcome to Compassion in Action, where advocacy meets real change, fighting for justice, equity, and healing, because every voice matters.
Tonight's guest is someone I am proud to call a classmate and a friend, Dr. Codi Peterson, a pediatric pharmacist, educator, and fierce advocate for patient-centered cannabis care. From national advocacy to his cannabis education wall at the California State Fair, Dr. Codi is helping reshape how we talk about the plant. And now that I've said all of this, I want to show you why I am so thrilled to have him as our guest tonight.
In Texas, where there isn't adult use, patients in Louisiana, where there's not enough dispensaries, and not enough in Georgia, where there's no flower that you can make into tea for a non-intoxicating, beautiful medicine. There's no reason we need to put this into the pharma place. Do you want the FDA? The organization who has said outright in the last 3 years, we don't know what to do with CBD. And I got bad news, FDA. We got 100 more cannabinoids I need you to figure out what you're going to do with.
Welcome, Dr. Codi Peterson. Welcome to Compassion in Action. So excited to have you here.
Man, y'all did a good job on this intro. I gotta say, very professional. Whoever's working in the background here behind the curtain, good job. Really cool to see that video. Reminds me of where we were just about a year ago. In Maryland, the University of Maryland School of Pharmacy, where we're graduates of. I noticed I was wearing the same shirt. Yes, class of 2022. I know that you're in that same class. It was the last picture you had. I was like, oh, I guess my wardrobe outfit was a little scant. The point being, though, is there's work. We've come a long way in this whole medical cannabis journey, but there's a lot of ground to still cover. But certainly, if we look back to, say, 22 years ago, which would be when ASA was formed, a lot has changed for the betterment of cannabis and cannabis patients. But with time has come some new challenges. So it's exciting, and I'm happy to be able to cheerlead on this movement.
I'm so glad to have you here. You just don't know how thrilled I am. Seriously, I am. I've been watching you for quite some time, especially since we were in school when you were our president of the Medical Cannabis Student Association.
Yeah.
And then just watching. Go ahead.
Well, it's funny, I didn't go for class president. I'm not really a class president type, I'll actually be honest with you. But what happened was that Megan had taken over the student organization, and then she shortly after decided to leave the program. And I just so happened to have been vice president, which is sort of more my speed, not the final decision maker. The buck doesn't stop here. Okay, the buck keeps going. But it was a beautiful opportunity. Turned out to be a real challenge and a growth opportunity for me. Taught me some stuff that I'm good at, and taught me some stuff that maybe I should find a helper for.
Excuse me. But you did a great job, though. You really did, especially graduation. We had a great time at the mixer that we had at the graduation, but I think you did a great job of keeping us all together, keeping us informed, as you do now. The same thing. I'm watching you on LinkedIn. I mean, if you all do not see him on LinkedIn, you definitely need to follow him on LinkedIn. You're talking about
if you don't see me, because I'm on there every day.
Every day there is something out there, cannabis related education. I mean, just so much information that he has to share out there. And I mean, it's just loads of information. It's like school every day. So
try to make it fun, but admittedly, sometimes it feels a little like school. I am an educator as well. It's really sort of something that I found my passion for just in the last 5 years, sort of since cannabis came into my cannabis education came into my life. But interestingly, it didn't come to me originally in the form of cannabis or the opportunity to teach about cannabis. It actually came in the form of paramedics. So
Oh.
I work full-time night shift at the hospital because, we all got to pay our bills. And so I'm a nighttime emergency department pharmacist. And while there, I saw paramedic students, they're firefighters, training to be the medic on the crew. And, started rambling on about drugs and what's sort of happening. I ended up getting an educator position at OCEMT, which is a paramedic school here in Southern California. And it's been very valuable, just learning and discovering how much I like to teach, and how in a weird way, I think internally, I've made my lectures feel more like a comedy or like stand-up. Like I really try to make sure the whole class laughs a few times, throw in a few jokes I didn't plan before the class, right? And I don't know, it feels good. That's what I can say is when you're up there teaching, it's just time goes fast.
But you're a natural, though. You're a natural.
Well, thank you. I hope that the listeners agree and follow me and learn something as well. And yeah, there's other opportunities to learn from me as well.
Oh yeah, and I love that. That's what I love about you, being such an educator, and I am too. So that really, really hits home with me. So we really do have that in common. So that's a connection that we have. So I love looking at your information, reading and learning. And to be honest with you, that's the first thing when I come up in the morning. Honestly, I am looking for stuff on LinkedIn. That's what I'm reading in the morning as soon as I wake up. So getting my morning education in and seeing what else I can learn in this cannabis field, just trying to keep myself well, because of course, here in Georgia, we don't really have a well-established program like California may have, or the education that's out there. And that's something that we're trying to change here, as to be able to more education here out there. So I really am appreciative of what you're putting out there for the masses to be able to learn, because that's just the biggest part of it, just being able to have the education, because there's so much misinformation out here.
It's a challenge to cut through the smoke, pun intended, and understand sort of what do we know, what do we think, and what has been suggested. And look, I'm not going to pretend to have all the answers. No one does in this space, but certainly I've got the acute training and sort of the knack for translating it. And I'm glad that the algorithm has decided to give you that help every morning, and share my work onto your feed. There is a lot of work to do, because we've created 47 different markets in, this 50 state country. And it has created a lot of differences in laws and regulations and even words and nomenclature and concentrations. This is hemp, this isn't hemp. Over here you can max 5 milligrams. Over here you can put 350 milligrams. And all those conversations, in a lot of ways are conversations that the pharmacist is already geared up and prepared for. And I think Georgia, at least from a legal perspective, would tend to agree with me that this is sort of something that falls right into a pharmacist's wheelhouse.
And I'm really hoping that we get to that point, because, you probably have heard that was part of what we had wanted to do in Georgia, was have it in pharmacies at one point. But of course, because it was all on, I forgot, was it Jimmy Kimmel? When it first came out, he mentioned it on his show. And the next thing we know, they shut it down. I think the DEA came in and was like, you can't do that.
Oh, so, yeah, exactly. I didn't know it was on Jimmy Kimmel, but to that
point. I think it was Jimmy Kimmel. It was one of them I was watching, and he made it as a joke, and I'm like, oh, Georgia's on TV now. But I thought it was in a good way, though, because I thought that was a great idea to have that in pharmacies, especially when you're thinking about location where people can actually get medication. But not only that, having someone who is knowledgeable and understands the other medications that someone actually is taking. As in school, we learned that drug interaction. So if the pharmacist is actually in on this, then you have an understanding of what the person's taking, when they're using cannabis, and kind of can give some more information. So I thought that would have been very good, but it
sure seems like the right setting. We've got the pharmacist already who's trained to do this type of counseling, and we need to get more pharmacists trained and ready to have these conversations about cannabis. But aside from that, the patient's probably already going somewhere like that. It's accessible. It's free, right? Like the counsel, for the pharmacist is essentially free. I think there's a lot of really good ideas, and I actually think that this is something that Georgia pushed forward that makes sense, especially independent pharmacies, which are struggling right now because insurance reimbursements and there's a lot of leeches on the system that is healthcare that are slowly sucking the life force from it. I'm not going to point too many fingers, but certainly it's not the patients and it's not the providers that are just stacking paper. So it's an unfortunate place we've got ourselves to all around, but I think cannabis can help. And I think putting it in pharmacies is a good idea. Of course, the DEA came in big bad pounding on their chest and they said, no, you can't put that marijuana, even though it's capped at 5% THC, which is at most 50 milligrams per milliliter. It's not a small dose, but it's not a lot. It's not a lot either. And here we are. We're at a stalemate right now, where even in the state of Georgia, where the law says that their low THC medical cannabis products should be able to be dispensed in pharmacies, the DEA has put a kibosh on that. It's crazy. I think it's a great idea. I wish
it is.
I'd see a little civil disobedience from one of my peers, and I'll support them. If you're in Georgia, you're listening to this, you're a pharmacist, you're on the edge. Let me go to bat for you too. Like, let's find a way to start doing this and to get some media attention around it, and to instead of like fly low key, to stand up and fight and say, this is the law. This is what the lawmaker and the people wanted. Let's do it.
And it's about access as well too. There's pharmacies everywhere. And there's local pharmacies in every county, every city. There's a local pharmacy somewhere. So if you are familiar with your local pharmacist, that feels more comfortable, to patients.
Angela, that access is so important. I'm in California. Everyone thinks of California as the Mecca, right? Where everybody can get their weed. I'm kind of right, right? Well, what if I told you that 50%, 51% of all counties and cities in California, zero cannabis businesses? Because because we made an opt-out law where specifically every jurisdiction, every ordinance, whatever the word is for locations, is there have the option to say no weed here. And so even though in the mind's eye and in this just California, the weed Mecca, you'd think there'd be cannabis businesses all over. But even, retail or delivery is banned in certain counties entirely. Which all it does is, to my point, is it fuels the black market. So if you only got 3, 4, 5, 7 medical cannabis dispensaries in all of Georgia, and you've got arbitrary limits that don't match the people's demands and wants, then you're just creating more black market demand. And there's no doubt about it. I don't have to ask hard. Like, you got some people still in the legacy market.
Yeah.
A couple.
Yeah. And then you have to be concerned about those things too, because it just depends. You may have some in that market that have safe products, but what about ones who may not? And that's where that safe access that we're all looking for comes from. Having it in a place where patients can get it and get it safely. That's not laced with fentanyl or something, that nature.
And not to be alarmist, like, I still think that humans should have full autonomy on where they choose to get their cannabis, but they should have the option. It's like they should have the option to go legal, and in that legal market, they should be assured that their product is tested and clean. And to point out, California, for example, needs to do better as well. Yes, we've tested the products, but there turns out they're all dirty for a bunch of stuff that's not on the test, right? It's like, the pesticide scandal is huge. LA Times has put out 4, 5, 6, different articles on it. So they're trying to expand the list of approved pesticides. They're trying to expand the testing. They're trying to do recalls. California's done more recalls in this year than they have for any year, all the years combined. Because they're trying to pick up the slack. They dropped the ball on really truly regulating this, and they're trying to play catch up right now. We'll see how it goes, but I can just tell you that we're continue to face challenges, even in states with California. Once again, you think of as this Mecca, and you think of as sort of figured it out, and access and all those things remain challenges here too.
Wow. That's something else. And then you're talking about pesticides. That just kind of jogged my memory about something that's going on right here now in legislation where I think on both sides it may have passed now. I have to check into that and see, but where they decided to remove the warning labels from pesticides here. Yeah.
Like for all the things in the garden, or from just the cannabis plants?
No, that's cannabis, but just pesticides in general. And what if I have that correctly? Yeah. So that was a bill that came through, and I was very, very surprised to see that that those warning labels are going to be removed from that, because I think it's only if it's something that I think if I'm not, I'm going to check on that shirt to be sure about that. If the FDA approved, is it FDA or wherever, if it's approved federally, that can be there if I'm not mistaken. But if not, if it's something that was in the state of Georgia, they're removing that. I'm going to get that correct though, because that's a bill that our co-founder Yolanda had been following as well. But I remember I was hearing some of the I was watching one of the hearings and was listening to some of the things they were basically saying in that, and it just didn't sit well with me.
For me, it just goes, it doesn't sit well with me either, because it goes against this idea of informed consent and knowledge sharing, right? So these are two sort of ethical pillars that have really been at the heart of kind of what we're doing, which is like, hey, we know what's in this cannabis, it's tested, therefore, maybe we don't know all the effects, but you're making an adult decision. And I think it would make sense that all the things, just the same way that we know the active and inactive ingredients, that we should have that sort of warning. I know we've gone a long way with government too, and people are looking for a happy balance where we've got some mixture of knowledge sharing without overwhelming and stifling business. But for me, knowledge is power, and we need to share as much as we can, especially about the toxicity of a product.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes a huge difference. And it's so disheartening, some of the laws that we're having to face, the challenges that we're facing in the fight that we have, but yet we continue. We're never going to give up, because it's very important to have medical cannabis. And that's something that I want everyone to understand. There's a reason why cannabis needs to be labeled for medicinal purposes, not only just for protection of all of us, but basically for me, I'm looking at some point in time when we can get to a point where we can have it covered by insurance. That's the biggest for me. And thinking about how difficult it is now for patients to be able to get some of their medication, and the affordability of it, being able to at least have it covered and have a copay makes a huge difference for some of us. So hopefully we can get there.
Yeah, I think that has to be part of the end goal if we're going to talk about equitable access, because right now it's only for people who, can legally get it and can afford it. And then there's also a huge cohort of people who can't get good information on cannabis. And this is a real struggle and tragedy, because it might seem easy, you just take a joint, you just puff on it once, but for at least a subset of people, that's going to cause an uncomfortable experience and potentially keep them from ever trying cannabis again, right? Because, especially in today's market, all we've got is a lot of THC and THCA rich flower. And so it can be a lot for a newbie. And, gummies can come in 5 or 10 milligrams is the normal in sort of regulated states. But in hemp products, we can have, up to 1 gram in a product, and some marijuana states as well. But the point is if you don't know what a milligram is, you just like chocolate, right? So you ate the whole chocolate bar or half the chocolate bar, then you won't know where to start. And if you're on other medications that can exacerbate the effects of THC, or medications that could interact with a large dose of CBD and change your blood, there's a lot of really nuanced reasons why patients shouldn't have to go to a healthcare professional to get access to cannabis. Right. But the option to, the ability to choose and opt in to get the care that we consider a right as it relates to every other medicine. Right. Medical rights is a word that was sort of drilled down my throat in pharmacy school. And part of that is the right to counsel and the that right to access, the right to affordable care. So both of these things really need to come into the mainstream, especially if we're going to acknowledge medical marijuana or cannabis or THC, whatever word we want to give to this plant and its molecules inside of it, as we come to the point where it's medicine, which of course I would remind everyone that the FDA and Health and Human Services have indeed suggested that it has medicinal value. It's only the EA dragging its feet at this point.
Right.
We have to be thinking in that fashion. Is like, what should people like just be given the right to as part of their healthcare?
Yeah, and even those who do not want to get into a medical program, there still needs to be education for them as well. So I think education needs to be all around, because not everybody wants a medical card, or even like in our state, everybody does not have a condition that qualifies for them to get a medical card. So, but there are other conditions that they have that cannabis does help. So, so for them to be able to have education is very important as well. So that's something that I know that we're really working on here, and wanting to do that, especially with our organization, wanting to have programs and educate providers, educate patients, educate the public, whether you're a patient or just your average citizen that who wants to utilize cannabis as for yourself, just to be able to have some education, to know about it, some credible education, I would say.
Yeah, and that's where I think the pharmacist can come in handy, especially for the novice patient, the patient who doesn't have a support network or doesning have friends who are potheads or whatever it might be. People who are afraid to enter the market. I think the pharmacist put a life floaty, a donut, so to speak, out there, a life ring. What is the word for this? The life raft? Yeah.
It's the life raft, the little life ring thing, life preserver.
Maybe,
maybe it's the
life preserver. Anyway, so I think it can be for a lot of these patients that are scared or don't have these support systems. I think it's important to note that while I think that should be an option, my personal belief is that everyone should have access to the plant, and we shouldn't be regulating anything that grows in people's gardens. We shouldn't be telling people what they can and can't do. But I do think adding this layer of medical legitimacy makes more sense. Of course, we could try to burn the whole system down and start over, and plants are the only medicine, and like totally restructure everything that is medicine. But to be honest, it doesn't really work, right? Because there are too many gems and good points in our healthcare system and expectations that we've developed. I don't see that as an option, but I do believe that with only a slight bit of education, we can get healthcare professionals on board and up to speed about what they need to know. And all we do is move some of these cannabinoid medicines and allow some home medicine use. It's not uncommon for a hospital, say the children's hospital that I work at, to allow patients and parents to bring in supplements, ginger or magnesium citrate, something like that. We don't need to totally reinvent the wheel to integrate. I'd love to reinvent the wheel and do all the studies and figure out everything we need about marijuana products. But in some ways, we just need to like let permiss it, right? It's been so against the law for so long that we can't even imagine how we'll manage this. But it turns out it's just not that different than other herbals or other supplements, or, a little bit different dosage form, a little bit more potent, right? Some side effects you need to be aware of. But overall, we can do this. That's what I tell my pharmacy school students, and what I tell my colleagues at the hospital when we're talking about trying to integrate them more into the medical cannabis flow. So we can do this, healthcare. We can do this, but we need buy-in. I mean, we need you guys to join in.
Yeah. And I think we'll be able to get that buy-in once we get more providers on the bandwagon. And get them to learning more about it. And I think there's just like a fear for some of them because of the stigma, what they heard. I mean, we all have that stigma. I grew up with the stigma. And so even in the healthcare profession, they were human. They are human. And so they grew up with that same stigma, and it wasn't taught in medical school. So
true.
They're still thinking,
or nursing school or pharmacy school.
Right.
We're talking about it like it's a bad thing in those areas still.
The devil's lettuce.
So I admittedly, I'm biased, right? I'm in California. I will tell you the times are changing. You know, the more and more I'm in healthcare, the more and more I'm around healthcare workers that consume cannabis, have family members that have benefited from cannabis, give cannabis to their kids for X, Y, or Z. You know, no, they don't give joints to their children. I'm saying leveraging cannabinoid medicine to you know, optimize health outcomes, whether it's ADHD or whether it's that, you know, they have a cognitive delay or cerebral palsy. Lots of opportunities to use cannabis even in kids. And again, like if we didn't have to go to Facebook for that knowledge, if we didn't have to go to Reddit, but instead there was conversations around how to do things like this safely, discussed with your pharmacist or discussed with your doctor or your nurse practitioner, whomever it might be, we're gonna do better. And we have to do better, right? The healthcare, it's not in a good way. And if cannabis can help, I say I'm for it.
Oh, absolutely. And that's something we want to see here. Right now, for the list of providers, it's only MDs, but I would love to see PAs, nurse practitioners, you know, other types of clinicians being able to have the education and also be able to consult patients, even dietitians. Because of course, when you're looking at whatever you're eating, you know, and having your dietitian understand cannabis and knowing that you're utilizing it as well, there's certain parts when it comes down to diet. So I think that that's a huge effort that we can make in educating all types of providers as well. And then you're thinking about that too. Something else I saw on LinkedIn. I don't know if I pronounced her last name correctly. Megan, is it Mwenge?
Bang, I think is the way it's said.
Okay. I get it. Yeah, but I was watching. I saw where she had posted where one of her sons, he had his ear pierced, and she was using the cannabis oil on his ear to help to heal it, and was saying how it was working. I'm like, see, there we go. There's so many properties and so many things that we could use. The
antibacterial, antimicrobial for a lot of cannabinoids, not so much THC or delta 9 THC, but definitely others is there. Just to share anecdote, I'm friends with Megan. I know Megan that she reminds me of with her cannabis oil, that it reminds me of the Windex from My Big Fat Greek Wedding.
Yes, you know, yes, put some Windex on it. I know.
Yeah. Everything. That's my running joke with Megan. But I think in specific for that use case, there's probably more evidence than most people ever realized that cannabis has anti-biofilm properties, which can be problematic bacteria in wounds. It has properties that are anti-gram negative and also anti-MRSA, MRSA, Staph aureus. So, I mean, there's no doubt that cannabinoid acids do play in this sphere. And because they're generally non-toxic, right, they won't really harm the skin or harm the human of being applied to. It's a pretty useful tool. I would love to see someone commercialize these wound care treatments. I have seen some people on the market making similar things for patients who have really hard to treat and repair wounds. I think that there's some value there. Plus, we always need more tools, right? I'm not saying it's going to replace all of our current existing wound care, and you know, the future of all medicine is cannabinoids, but all types of medicine probably have a use case or two where cannabinoids could be implicated, help improve patient outcomes, help improve quality of life, do very little harm. But because it's cannabis right now and we don't talk about it, there's no evidence. Right. You know, we dance around it as if medicine wasn't an art already. You know, as if we had like just one way to do it. But that's just not the way that medicine is practiced.
Yeah. That's when you think about that. It's just piggybacking on what you said when you say that you think about the number of conditions that we have and the number of medications, pharmaceutical that we have, like the blood pressure medication. There's more than one kind. So there's more than
one.
That. Yes.
That's something we learned through the, you know, first of all, we probably knew in pharmacology a long time ago, but using more than one agent to treat a disease is increasingly common. A lot of the drugs, small molecule drugs that have come out in recent years are combination drugs, naturally putting in two drugs that sort of work in synergistic or additive ways that are beneficial, but not the same way. And this is what, you know, we can talk about THC and CBD together, for example, you know, despite some mixed evidence about whether or not one is protective from getting high. We do have a lot of evidence to say that it seems to work better than just one alone. And we see that in the studies of, not Epidiolex, Sativex, which is a 1-to-1 THC and CBD cannabis-derived medicine. You familiar with this one? Sativex is approved in 17 countries around the world, including Canada and the UK. And it is plant-based THC and CBD for multiple sclerosis.
Okay, I hadn't heard of that one.
Yeah, it's actually way more common than Epidiolex, which is only approved in a few countries for a few conditions, and more prevalent and used more widely than Marinol throughout the world.
Marinol, okay.
Yeah, Sativex is the spray in the mouth. Anyway, to that effect, we've seen these good benefits. We've seen utility around these multimodal medicines. And when they were trying to study MS and which drug worked best, whether it was they looked at THC alone and CBD alone, and it didn't. It was actually the THC and CBD that worked best together. And it's specifically used for spasticity, muscle tension in multiple sclerosis.
Wow. I'm wondering why do you think that healthcare institutions are being so slow to adapt to these the role of cannabis?
Yeah, I think the simplest way to put this is healthcare historically, and especially increasingly now, is beholden to federal money. Federal money is all linked to limits on Schedule I substances, and therefore everyone's had their head in the sand, looking away, because Medicare, Medicaid funding is the funding. And so if you're not in private practice, you're really going to be very apprehensive to touch or talk about or engage with cannabis and the Schedule I drug. All hospitals don't mind engaging with THC Marinol, Schedule III substance. Bring it in. We got a process for that. Ain't no problem. Even though it's the same psychoactive component, except it's produced in pharma, right, and made in a lab instead of in a plant. The same psychoactive component, everybody carries it. There's other options that are in cannabinoids that are controlled substances that we'll use as well, but they're all Schedule II or Schedule III or Schedule IV, not Schedule I. And because of the Schedule I status, we're sort of, I don't know, all sticking around with our thumb up our butts.
Yeah, I totally agree. And that brings me to ASA, and what Steph is trying to do with the Schedule VI.
It looks like she's been a guest on the podcast before. Steph Scherer.
Yes, she has. Yes, she has. Love Steph. And I know you're part of ASA now as well, too.
I'm on the board of directors of Steph's board of directors. That's correct. Look, there's still work to be done, and ACE is trying to remind people of that. We aren't all tucked in and everything is hunky-dory in the medical cannabis market. The cannabis market in general is struggling. But in medical cannabis, patients are losing ground. We are losing support. We're losing tax benefits. We're losing the protections in some places potentially, all because we somewhere in the middle of commercialization, we lost the message that patients first, patients matter. And so ACE is doing a good job, I believe, to highlight that patients first, get these conversations going. Don't think that patients will just get taken care of because adult use is thriving. The truth is, and I know you've experienced this, the companies that are out there, they're interested in making a profit, keeping their head above water because taxes are crazy high. Patients and patient experiences and patient support is really not their focus. It can't be. They're too busy fighting the fight, or their own fight, let's say. So we can't forget about patients, especially because a lot of the patients that did some of the early fighting, they're gone now. Whether they've passed, whether they've just gone into retirement, whether they're burnt out because this has been such a tough industry. So we really need these reinforcements. And I believe that healthcare workers are an option to create some of that reinforcement, because I know I'm not alone in my thoughts and feelings around medical cannabis.
No, actually you're not, because I know several who are in the fight as well, from a healthcare standpoint, practitioners and so forth. And it is needed. And I'm glad that you did bring that out, because we do need to have clinicians or healthcare professionals to be able to be in this fight to kind of talk about it more. So we can reduce the stigma and be able to get some laws to change, because we really do need that. And you're right that patients are seeming to be forgotten at this point. That's one of our mottos, I would say, at what GMCS is patients over profit. And that's what we truly believe.
It has to be. And, the problem is right now, what I'm seeing happening is as we move out of prohibition, it seems like the same winds are blowing, but they've sort of changed the banner, right? So we're leaving this harms and prohibition harms mindset, but we're calling it, instead of harms about prohibition, harms of cannabis prohibition, whatever, it's now harms of how do I want to say this? It's like under public health, look at all the bad things that are happening. Whether even my research, which is on cannabinoid hyperemesis, has been criticized for this. It's like all the money that's been shifted and focused to have an anti-cannabis slant is probably still going to keep flowing that way, even if they make a change to sort of an anti-addiction, public harms mindset, instead of where we need to go, which in integrating into healthcare, looking at patients that are consuming cannabis, watching what outcomes they have, monitoring these real world patients who are getting it, instead like really controlled experiments and labs, kind of looking at it like it's alcohol or tobacco, instead of the herb and supplement and life supporter that it is. So I really fear that we're going to go from incarceration in the prison industrial complex to like the addiction industrial complex, and everybody's going to be in treatment for their cannabis use disorder. Even in the definition of cannabis use disorder, there's a misnomer. So cannabis use disorder, which I believe is real, marijuana can definitely be addicting and challenging to quit. No one dies from quitting, but they get pretty moody. They have a lot of the withdrawal. It can happen. It does not everybody, but it can happen. People can choose to prioritize cannabis over other important things in their lives. But to that effect, what I'm getting at is we're moving to this idea that if in the definition of cannabis use disorder, it says daily use, right? Continued daily use. And if you take it away, you'll experience a withdrawal symptom. That's part of the criteria for the addiction disorder. But if that was any prescription medication, almost any prescription medication, well, there may be some poop medicine or something. If I give it to you for an extended period, let's say 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks daily, like you're supposed to take it, and I pull it away, you'll say, yeah, well, of course you're going to feel different, right? So that's already built into any medicine that we take daily. And in addition, you wouldn't tell your patients to take less frequently for something that's working. Yeah, I've been taking my medication every day. It seems to be helping. Well, the doctor says, not daily, right? Oh, we need to make sure you take some days off because we wouldn't want you to do that every day. And so it just doesn't line up with the medical ethos and the current thinking. And I fear that's because, once again, we're sort of dropped the banner of prohibition and put up the banner of this new like public health harms by cannabis that's waving in the same sort of negative wind, so to speak. That's what I think is my biggest fear right now. Not that you asked me my biggest fear, but that's it.
No, but that's something that we need to know, though. But I do want to ask you a quick question too. What inspired you to speak so openly about cannabis use in pediatric care, though?
Well, pediatrics is my specialty. So that's just sort of happenstance. I just see every day in and out of the hospital, complex chronic children that could benefit from adding medical cannabis. I have one really amazing success story that comes to mind all the time. It's a little boy, 2 years old, on high doses of antiepileptics, still having seizures all day, every day. We started him on cannabis within a year, seizure free, and took off all those prescriptions. And just like there's just a million examples of this where I believe it could be helpful. So that's why I talk about kids. But specifically going back is that no one taught me about cannabis in college, even though it's a medicine, even though medical cannabis, at that time was legal in numerous states. No one in pharmacy school taught me any of that. I go to Bayer School of Pharmacy in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Duquesne. But while I was there, I had a girlfriend. Her grandmother was dying. At that time, I was making some brownies on the side,
Mm-hmm.
and I knew how to make a cake. And Granny requested a cake. She had tried marijuana in the 60s. She's stage 4, end of life, pancreatic cancer, had been taking all the sleepy medicines, the morphine, the Ativans, and wasn't herself. We brought her the cake. She had a slice. She had the best 1 night or 2 nights that anyone could remember. Had a full meal and after not eating for weeks. Called her children, had a lucid conversation with them, and then a couple days later, she was gone. And it just felt like such a dignified death in a world where I know what happens to hospice patients and sort of how we hasten in an attempt to relieve their pain. And if cannabis can relieve their pain, but not hasten things, not make it uncomfortable, then I think it should be an option. Not everyone should get this and this is the replacement. It should be an option, and an earlier option across numerous disease states and everything. If cannabis could help, it could have helped more earlier. And so I think that integrating cannabis medicine earlier in care is an important goal as well.
I agree with that. I know one of the bills that we have that was out there was trying to change it from end of life so that people can use it sooner, especially in cancer, because that's what we had it here was end of life. And it's like, why would you want to wait till someone is dying? Or at that point to allow them to use it at that point when we know that it could potentially help even before. But I'm glad that we're looking at changing that.
Yeah, we're moving in that direction. In California, we've got Ryan's Law, which says that as a individual with a terminal diagnosis, so less than 1 year to live, you're allowed to use medical cannabis in all of the healthcare facilities that you go to. So if you go to long-term care, if you're in the rehab hospital, you're allowed to use non-inhalable cannabis in the hospital. They have to let you use cannabis medicine because that is the reasonable thing to do when someone is passing. We should allow them to use whatever plants it is that they want to use. And so that's my take, and I think it makes sense. This has been a big focus of my nonprofit that we started here in California, the Pharmacist Cannabis Coalition of California. So that's really been one of our focuses, is trying to get healthcare organizations geared up to address Ryan's Law.
That's really good. I think that's going a long way in making sure that a person is comfortable and being able to use whatever they want, especially in palliative care is what they call it, right?
Palliative,
It's at that palliative. Okay, it's palliative care. Yeah. So I think that's key in being able to do that. But when we're coming down to medical cannabis, and why do you think that some providers are still hesitant? And if they are, what would you do to engage them, or what would you tell a provider that's still hesitant about using it as a treatment option?
Well, providers aren't allowed to prescribe. So that's already up there. That's already out there. So then I would tell the provider, well, what state are we talking about? Because each state's going to have its own laws. But once you identify that, there's clear protections legally and legal precedent that protects doctors from talking about and discussing medical marijuana. So even though it's a Schedule I substance, specifically doctors, more so than pharmacists, have legal protections and the legal precedent to have these conversations. So rest at ease, you can do that. I would say to doctors, and as I say to pharmacists all the time, putting your head in the sand is not empowerment. It's the opposite. You're disempowering yourself, because your patients know about this medicine. Your patients are using this medicine, not just some of them. 25% of Americans, right, are consuming cannabis with regularity, at least in the last month. And so a large majority of people are consuming this. Know about it, be inquisitive about it. Maybe you can intervene and help somebody head off inappropriate use. But even better, what if you learn that your patient's amazing drop in blood pressure, or improvement in one of their signs is because they started a cannabis treatment, right? And because you're not asking about it, because you don't know what the CBD is or the cannabis stuff. We don't teach about that. You're actually limiting your knowledge and your ability to do your doctorly work. So I would say you wouldn't talk about anything else like, oh, we don't want to know about that, right? So drop the stigma. Yeah, there was a time of prohibition, but before that, it was totally legal. and we don't have the evidence. We have evidence that it wasn't made illegal for good reasons, right? It was made illegal for control. It was made illegal to build up the prison industrial complex. And let's not keep our head in the sand and allow it to become this addiction industrial complex. Let's instead integrate into our systems, become more accepting of people's choices on what to use and consume when it is safe.
I want to switch it up just a little bit, because when you were talking about that, the prison industrial complex, and so it brought me to like for advocacy organizations like ours and ASA. So with the legislation like the CJS appropriations bill, it's included provisions to protect state medical cannabis programs from federal interference. How important are these protections, and what would the risk be to patients if those safeguards were removed or ignored?
Okay, so you're talking about the CJS amendments, which is sometimes called the Rohrabacher-Farr Amendment, which basically says, this happened in the Obama eras. This is when they went ahead and changed the criminal something injustice funding, right? So how they fund the Department of Defense and how they fund policing organizations. They said, we will not use any federal funding to go against state medical marijuana laws. So of note, a couple things: medical marijuana laws, which means all the existing recreational adult use markets are actually not anywhere protected illegally right now.
Right.
So hypothetically, the DEA could go busting down the doors of those organizations today, and the federal government could make a pretty strong case that they're justified in doing that. As far as medical dispensaries are concerned, there's this what we call a rider or an amendment. It's just one line stuck into the end of the spending bill for the criminal justice system. And right now, every 2 years, that rider must be reapproved. So every time they do the budget for this CJS, they have to approve all the language. And at any point, they could pencil out this protections package. And if they did that, that would make not just adult use cannabis programs illegal. It would make medical cannabis programs enforceably illegal. So if you go back to the years 2014 to 2016 during Obama's, I guess that was his first term, what you'll see is a dramatic difference in raids. In the early part of his term, the DEA and everyone was still busting down doors and arresting dispensary owners all over California. And it was still quite a lot of sort of kind of that old school policing technique that we would see as it relates to drugs. And then eventually we got something called the CJS amendment passed. It's my understanding ASA was helpful in that, but I was not involved at the time. And we got the CJS rider, the Rohrabacher-Farr amendment, whatever you want to say, passed, and therefore the funds aren't there. Therefore, there haven't been raids. They've dropped to an abysmally low level. But it doesn't mean they couldn't turn back on, right? If let's say it gets so bad that no one's participating in the legal market, everything becomes the illicit market. And right now, let's say the cartels take over the lion's share again of the market, and you can see how the federal government is currently posturing towards cartels. You could see this exploding into another, saga of the war on drugs, another battle, so to speak. And I really don't want to see that happen. I want to see the cannabis industry thrive. I want to see the integration of healthcare where appropriate. I want to see the decriminalization across the board. And I want to see, more people get access and more people be able to afford their medicine.
Yeah. And that's why ASA's work is so important, and why we also, partner and work with ASA as well, because Steph's been doing this for so many years and has made so much progress in the cannabis space, in being able to get some things taken care of. But of course, the patients have started to fall through the cracks, of course. So the fight continues, and of course it takes funding to do that. So definitely that's something that we're looking at as well, is making sure that some of the things that we actually do can support ASA on that federal level, because we need not only a fight at the state levels, but we need it at the federal level as well. So it's more like a simultaneous, to me, that we need to be fighting in both areas.
Yeah, it's pretty unpredictable at the federal level. I think you got a little tighter control at the states, and that's the beauty of our democracy, or at least historically. And so I think there's some sense to that. We need federal reform. Everything we're doing at the state level is to circumvent, counteract, and work around existing dumb federal law. And it just makes more sense to start at the top and restructure from there. But since we don't have that control, it makes sense for me or for you and all of us to work at the state level. I was just in Sacramento this weekend with California Normal, and a co-sponsored Americans for Safe Access event, lobbying in Sacramento. And they actually heard us this time, but it was an easy lift. I think I mentioned to you right before we went on air. Our ask was, tax us less. There's an automatic increase in taxes coming. It's going to be really detrimental. It's going to push a lot of people back into the black market. And politicians sort of hurt us in California, but there's kind of, I think, a blowback to taxes right now here. People are struggling to buy their eggs and their food, but taxes have never been higher. So I think that there's a movement to try to stop that, and it looks to be nationwide.
But that's good that they listened, and I hope they really do. Because I don't think we'll increase taxes. Enough.
We got a lot of problems in the industry. That it was a pretty easy ask. Like, please don't tax us to literal death. But then, the real solutions that need to come after haven't been litigated and regulated yet. But it's so important that we have reform. We put all these, compassionate use states up and tried to figure it out. A lot of what we've done hasn't worked, but we have to retool. We can't continue to just beat a compressed nail into nothing. We need to find out where, who else we can serve, expand our position, differentiate medical and adult use, and really find a way to create a thriving cannabis ecosystem. Because as you probably know, the industry is struggling.
Yeah. And that's what we hearing a lot of that the industry is really struggling right now. So hopefully we can have some type of reform. But I'm always going to be hopeful, that there's going to be someone that's going to actually listen, and we can be able to have some change. So I stay optimistic.
Yeah, and don't be too discouraged by the idea that you're working in Georgia. Like the pharmacy law is kind of an example of how good things could happen if we can still find those retools at the state level and then try to sell them upwards to the state. So, I'm still hopeful that the Georgia program goes online. I hope that someone watching tonight is a pharmacist in Georgia and they reach out to me and say, hey, I heard you talking about my state. Let's collaborate. Let's find a way to do our civil disobedience, because I think that's something that has to be, that we have to acknowledge, is that everyone who's in cannabis, because that Schedule I status, because the only thing keeping us from being criminals is the CJS appropriations bill. There's some civil disobedience that you're doing, and I appreciate that, because America's sort of built on it, and we need to disobey when the rules don't make sense.
So another question. So why do you think it's critical to protect and expand medical cannabis programs, even in adult use states?
Because the needs of these patients are different. It's adult use is amazing. It's normalization. It's everything I ever wanted, and it should have always been acceptable, right? But that's not what happened. And what's happening in these adult use states is these programs are overgrowing in their focus, right? In this highly compressed and highly challenged market, you can kind of only pick one, and patients are getting left behind. Like patients with Lou Gehrig's disease, patients with, Parkinson's syndrome, patients with dementia. They're not getting taken care of. They're not getting their needs supported because there's no model for that. And because the dispensary, the bud tender, the dispensary is not the right place, and the bud tender is not the right person to address the needs of these medical patients. So because I believe that it's a right to have access to these sorts of things, then therefore I believe that we need to differentiate. We need to protect medical programs where they exist, and protect them even into the era of adult use, because we see time after time, state after state, people opting out of the medical program, which says to me three things maybe. Some patients are just medical patients to get access. That's fine. I don't have a strong objection, but we know that's true. 2, there's not a lot of value add. What we're doing, what I'm doing, whatever in the medical cannabis market in California isn't good enough, right? And the incentives are just not there. So we'll leave it at those 2 things is what it tells me. But I think that we can do better from a tax perspective. Cannabis companies are illegal according to the federal government, but not illegal enough to not tax them with extremely heavily and not allow them to write off any taxes. So that's another one of these big challenges that we still see. It's like the government says this stuff is bad. The state says it's okay, but the federal government still says, okay, well, pay me. And then more than that, now the state wants to sort of squeeze these cannabis industries into being a golden goose when, because of the incentive structure and the illicit market, the legacy market, we continue to struggle. And yet they want more juice, more tax juice. So
yeah,
lots of challenges,
lots of them. But I do want to say this. So what are some of the most urgent issues that ASA is tracking right now, and how can people get involved?
Sure. So ASA was highly involved and super interested in what was happening with rescheduling cannabis from a Schedule 1 to a Schedule 3. That was some of the biggest stuff. However, that was put on a hard pause, and there's no plan to resume. So that was one of the big focuses. The biggest thing our focus on is the Medical Cannabis and Cannabinoid Act that we have in Ledge Council that is hopefully going to become a bill very, very soon and be pushed through the channels of regulatory. That would create a new Schedule 6, something that's never been done before. It would create a different framework. It would create a network of pharmacies to dispense cannabis throughout the country. And it would decriminalize adult use. It would release all cannabis prisoners. Lots of really great stuff. So if you want to check that out, go to asa.org. Is that right? Safeaccess.org. There it is. And you can, read more about that Medical Cannabis and Cannabinoid Act. The other work that we're interested in is all centered around that similar goal. But certainly we want to make sure that the CJS, amendments and appropriations are kept. We don't want to see any amendments doubling fines and making things worse, which have been proposed lately. Expanding school protection zones, et cetera. So we are actively seeing in the federal government right now, a little bit of fight clawback from cannabis. The biggest thing coming down the pipeline, which I think changes the landscape of the cannabis industry, not so much ASA's work on the nonprofit side, is the Farm Bill and what happens with the 2025, if they get it done, Farm Bill around farm subsidies, around what the rules are for hemp, which is currently everything in the marijuana industry is hemp, apparently. We don't have time to get into hemp versus marijuana, but the distinguishing factor is the content of THC. But people aren't really following the rules or sort of misconstruing the rules. So there's a lot of what is just historically marijuana being sold as hemp in a lot of states. I don't know what the status is in Georgia. There's a part of me that says, well, maybe that's not the worst thing. It is a type of decriminalization, right? But the problem is it's all based on a lie. Like, I can't get behind something that's about like manipulating the language of a word, right? I'd like to see hemp be hemp and marijuana be marijuana, and I'll call it all cannabis. And so that would be my favorite. Anything else we need to discuss with our audience?
No, I just wanted the last thing I want to ask you, is there anything new or upcoming that you're currently working on that you'd like to share with anyone?
Yeah, my cannabinoid hyperemesis study is one of my big focuses right now. We're trying to help better understand. We did a survey of 1,160 people who have a vomiting disorder associated with cannabis use. We're really trying to dig in and understand what what goes on with their use patterns, what goes on with their symptoms. How can we figure that out? I can't share too many of the details yet. I'd love to, but it's in peer review and research style. But definitely, if you're interested in that topic, I would love to chat with anybody offline about it, or just stay put. We'll hopefully have it published by the end of the year.
Oh, great. That's amazing. Great. And I definitely want to thank you so much for sharing this. For you're doing to be helping us in making sure science and compassion coexist in the space. And that patients, especially the most vulnerable, are not forgotten, and that's very important, very important. But but I definitely want to say thank you to you for showing tonight, and just, is there anything else that you want to share before we go? Your how people can find you.
Yeah, so the Cannigma right here, right? So at the Cannigma is where you'll find all the content that we're doing there. The Cannigma is actually really excited to see this revitalized here soon, so check it out. You'll see an email soon. And then I'm Cannabis PharmD. It's along the bottom. You should have seen it. So you can follow me there. That's good enough. If you want to talk to me more, I'm on LinkedIn the most. Find me there.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate you, Angela.
Thank you.
Have a great night.
And thank you too. And before we close, I want to share something very incredible, some exciting news that we have. Our 2HW Summit, the Holistic Health and Wellness Summit, it's coming in July on the 26th at the Fernbank Science Center in Atlanta. It's going to be a full day event. We'll focus on healing from the inside and out through nutrition, plant medicine, and integrative care. Stay tuned for more updates on speakers and workshops. And if you're interested in supporting or joining us, visit 2hwsummit.com for sponsorship opportunities and more details. And of course, keep an eye on Dr. Codi Peterson. Whether it's new educational content, legislative updates, or workshops, you'll want to stay connected to everything he's doing in this space. This has been Compassion in Action. Thank you for watching, and remember, healing happens when we lead with knowledge, empathy, and courage. See you next time.
Knowledge, empathy, and courage.
Yes.
See you next time.
We all have an endocannabinoid system present and active in our bodies, whether we use cannabis or not. I like to say the ECS is in your brain, your belly, your bones, and your balls. The endocannabinoid system is everywhere around the body. It's a complex cellular signaling system that was only discovered in the 1990s while researchers were studying THC. Since that time, scientists have identified an endocannabinoid system on nearly all animals on planet Earth, except maybe insects. Its primary function is to regulate all the body's systems, to maintain a state of homeostasis or balance that's necessary for health and wellness. I'm Dr. Codi Peterson, a pediatric pharmacist, cannabis science expert, and chief science officer of the Cannigma. Our cannabinoid receptors are stimulated by numerous types of cannabinoids: endocannabinoids, phytocannabinoids, synthetic cannabinoids, and either other plant compounds like terpenes and flavonoids. These compounds can have a variety of effects on numerous physiological processes, including pain, memory, stress management, appetite, immune function, and so much more. If an internal force, such as pain from an injury or a fever, throws off your body's homeostasis, the endocannabinoid system kicks in to help return it to its ideal operating state. This is why cannabis can help for so many different conditions. I've spent the last decade teaching pharmacists, paramedics, and other healthcare professionals about the endocannabinoid system and the pharmacology of cannabis. The ECS is one of my favorite topics. I talk about it till I'm blue in the face. In this course, we'll dive into how the ECS works, the pharmacology of cannabis, and the way it affects each body system. Again, I'm Dr. Codi Peterson, your cannabis science expert, and this is my course on the endocannabinoid system and the human body.